One of these days, we are just going to start recording when we all get together on the Zoom before we agree that we're going to begin the episode, because there's so much that happens. I've never been with a group of people that takes so long to go from getting on the Zoom to actually start recording, because we all love catching up and shooting the breeze and talking about goaltending. And right now we're talking about some of our activities during the holidays, but this is fun stuff. But one of these days we're just going to roll it and take it right on through. No formal start to the episode. Darren Millard along with David Hutchison and Kevin Woodley. It's InGoal Radio Podcast, brought to you by the Hockey Shop, source for sports Langley, thehockeyshop.com. Woody is back from his surf vacation. How are the waves?
They were perfect, as in not too big for my sorry ass to surf. So it was, everyone's like, hey, the surf is down. I'm like, this is perfect. Between the waist and the shoulder height is exactly where I live. Thank you very much. There were a few overhead, but I just let them go by, Darren. It was an amazing trip. It was excellent. And we do have a lot to talk about beyond our vacations, because, man, has it been busy around the National Hockey League while I was gone.
NHL going through the draft process and now free agency. And there's some movement that's happened in and around the Hockey League. We'll get into that in just a little bit. We have the Stop It Goaltending You, the app parent segment. Hutch, you've got some plans about with your child dealing with teammates.
This week we published a fantastic on-ice session with LA Kings Director of Goaltending, Bill Ranford from TendyFest, where he walked everyone through their left shoulder dominant back of net play system. And afterwards, Bill was kind enough to do a nearly 1 hour Q&A session for everybody in attendance at TendyFest, moderated by Woody. And in that session, lots of great parent content. But one of the questions came up from a young goaltender who said, what do I do when my teammates are scoring on me? Kind of a frustrating situation that we all face right up to beer league. So you might as well get used to that, folks, because all roads lead to beer league, as they say. And anyway, just wanted to address that question this week in the parent segment. We're going to actually play the clip from Bill and his response to that, and then expand on it a little bit to different situations where you might be frustrated with teammates and how to give your goalie some advice on the best way to respond to that.
The on-ice demo at TendyFest was brilliant. Congratulations to Bill for that presentation, and to you guys for just putting it together. An incredible audio presentation, but the video and the multiple cameras really dialed in with what Bill was doing with young Maddie on the ice.
Well, full credit to Hutch for dialing in the audio to the point where you could actually hear it. It was a tough task because, as you know, this is a bit of a challenge when you have people outside the rink that want to listen to what's being said in the rink. We had them fully mic'd up, but all the speakers at most arenas are set up right above the ice so that like free skates and, figure skating. And so the people on the ice can hear it, not for the people in the stands. So in order for us to make sure that the crowd around the arena at TendyFest could hear what Bill was talking about, we had to crank it, which created a ton of audio coming over top of Bill and Maddie's live mic. So Hutch did a great job of cleaning that up. And if you don't know what we're talking about, make sure you go over to InGoalMag.com. It is Bill Ranford, 4-time Stanley Cup winner, 2 as a goalie, 2 as a goaltending coach, now the director of goaltending with the Los Angeles Kings. He spent 15 full minutes on the ice walking us through if you're catch with your left hand, left shoulder dominant net play system that the LA Kings have taught for years. And not only does it make it easier talking to goalies like Phoenix Copley about it when he went in and learned it, Eunice Corpusalo, the short time he was there, he adopted it, make it easier to track pucks behind the net, simplify the process for goalies, but it also takes a lot of burden off the hips. So if you haven't seen it already, make sure you check it out at InGoalMag.com. 15-minute video with Bill on the ice explaining the LA Kings left shoulder dominant behind the net system. And as Hutch said, there was a follow-up Q&A that we went upstairs afterwards and had to spend a good almost an hour with Bill. And yeah, we'll have that coming up this week at InGoalMag.com as well. So make sure if you don't subscribe already, as good a week as any to hop on board.
That's available to you after you listen to this episode of InGoal Radio, the podcast, brought to you by the Hockey Shop, source for sports Langley, thehockeyshop.com. You will get some current NHL analysis and feedback from Alex Lyon in our feature interview brought to you by NHL Sensorina, Lyon from the Detroit Red Wings, which is great because he's bounced around a little bit. He got different partners, and you were able to sort of delve into some of those experiences, Woody.
Well, when you move around like that, you learn a lot of different things from a lot of different goalies. And one of the guys that he talked a lot about in the interview coming up is Sergei Bobrovsky, who we can now officially congratulate. We did the double congratulations last week. We can officially congratulate on a Stanley Cup championship. So timely to have Alex on to talk about some of the lessons he learned from him. But that's not all. This is a fantastic interview. I know I say that a lot about our interviews, but he's one of those guys that really just was an open book and shared an absolute ton about his path. And more importantly, for young goalies who might be going through similar experiences at various levels and ages, all the lessons along the way. So it's a great one. I can't wait to share it with our audience.
Hockey Shop Gear segment, we'll delve into the True Catalyst line of skates. Is everything back at the Hockey Shop? Just wondering what's happening over at Source for Sports Langley, the Hockey Shop, hockeyshop.com after TendyFest.
Yeah, see, so Cam, I go away on vacation. Well, Cam has to do all the hard work of putting everything back on the shelves that he took off for TendyFest. It is done. And in addition to getting everything back in order over at Goalie Utopia, there is a ton of new stuff that is now available, and we'll have it in upcoming gear segments. Like you said, we got the True Catalyst line of skates this week, but coming up in the next couple of weeks, the CCM Axis XF stick, which we've had a ton of pro validation. Like Thatcher Demko loves this stick, and a lot of other guys that are using it really, really liked this twig. It's now available at the Hockey Shop and thehockeyshop.com. As well, the new Bauer Connect 2 skate, the new version of it, the all blacked out one that we saw in the National Hockey League this year on goalies like Andrei Vasilevsky, that is also available along with a new fit system. So Cam's going to walk us through that in the upcoming weeks. In addition to everything we've covered, there's a ton of new gear coming. As a matter of fact, it's there already. You can check it out at thehockeyshop.com or in person at the Hockey Shop Source for Sports in Langley and get your hands on, like we talk about the latest and the greatest. Cam's got it all on the shelves ready for you to check out either in person or online.
There's no better resource for your gear and your gear questions than the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports Langley, thehockeyshop.com, Cam and Company. That should be on the side of the building, Cam and Company.
Oh, come on. That head's going to get even bigger. Won't be any mass left that fit him.
I'm trying to give him more. I'm trying to pump his tires a little bit, expand that corner.
Well, listen, the gear companies are going to have to expand the sizes of their mass if we pump that tire anymore.
Some news around the National Hockey League coming out of the National Hockey League draft. A few swaps, trades. We touched on a couple of the just shuffling that happened a week ago. And on top of that, let's start with the Edmonton Oilers putting Jack Campbell on waivers for the purposes of a buyout, just a couple of years after that significant splash through free agency.
Well, and a contract as well. Recent InGoal magazine or InGoal radio podcast guest, Calvin Pickard, signed to a 2-year extension with the Oilers. So obviously he earned that job as their backup moving forward, and good for him. It's unfortunately for Jack Campbell, who's also been very kind to us over the years with his time and interviews at his expense. So I think, as much as it seems harsh to say this, when you're talking about a buyout and a team basically paying you to go away, which I guess is what we're talking about here, this could be a really good opportunity for Jack Campbell, because it didn't appear there was going to be one for him in Edmonton, short of injuries, with Stuart Skinner establishing himself and Calvin locked in as the backup. So Jack's going to get a chance with this buyout to sign somewhere else, hopefully get another sort of fresh lease on goaltending life, and maybe a little less pressure, less of a contract, but an opportunity to play again, and for his sake, hopefully at the NHL level, because he did a really good job once he went down and sort of settled down in the American Hockey League level. I think he finished the year with a save percentage around .920. So it's not the end of the road; it's just the end of his time in Edmonton.
I have no doubt that somebody signs him to a contract. If it's a two-way, if it's an American Hockey League contract and you can turn that into something, but he will play in North America.
I believe that 100%. I actually I won't name names, but I know at least one team kicked the tires on the idea of acquiring him with Edmonton retaining half. Now, ultimately, Edmonton saves more money this way. Like, it's less of a cap hit spread out over a longer term by going the buyout route. And it again, for an acquiring team, now you're looking at being able to get him for less than half of that original $5 million salary. And for all the talk about that contract and what it meant and whether it was wise, I still believe Jack Campbell can play at this level. It's just asking him to be a $5 million starter didn't work out in Edmonton.
A week ago, Jacob Markstrom was acquired by the New Jersey Devils, and Darcy Kemper was returned to the Los Angeles Kings for a second go-around in Hollywood. This week, the Washington Capitals acquire Logan Thompson from the Vegas Golden Knights. And I pause there because I'm trying to absorb the idea of an all-Southpaw goaltending tandem.
I'm trying to remember who it was, because somewhere along the way, this idea was raised as a problem in the eyes of a National Hockey League goaltending coach, or at the very least, a potential problem. And I'm really struggling to remember exactly where it was.
I remember that too.
Did Jose Theodore and Thomas Vokoun play for the Florida Panthers at some point together? Or somebody with Vokoun in Nashville? And it might have even been Mitch Korn, who's also back in Nashville, coincidentally, talking about the two lefties. And I'm trying to find a message that I got about this, because we have a coach that we know sent me a note about his experiences with having two lefties on a university team and the shooters not liking it one bit, because your habits in terms of where the glove is and shooting glove, your instincts can change if every time you do it at both ends of the ice in a practice, it's on the opposite hand compared to, 95% of the rest of the league. So I'm really kind of curious to see how this goes, having two full rights on the same team, and whether this becomes a topic for discussion again amongst shooters in Washington.
The practice goalie is going to get a lot of extra time called out there for the shooters. I want to work on a left-handed catching goalie in there a little bit.
Job opportunity.
Well, I'd say they have in Washington. I think is it Matt Leonard?
Yes,
or Brett. I'm brain cramping on the name.
I've written that last name up.
Yeah, and he's a video coach, former NCAA goaltender who does a lot of practice stuff with. And if I butchered the name, I apologize, because I've only had about 3 hours sleep on a overnight flight home last night, so that's my excuse.
If we could all struggle with overnight flights from Hawaii, we'd all be better off. Wouldn't we be in a great place, Hutch?
Oh, I can feel the tears coming now. I just feel so badly for Woody and what he's been through the last week.
It's easy to make fun of him,
but I know he can overcome it though.
I just can't get the names right.
No,
I need an excuse here. I may have screwed this up.
I'm telling you, there's real impact of red ice. They're hard, and it does take you a couple of days to get back on the swing of things. It's just when you add in
just don't look
that it's
sympathy.
from Hawaii, that's where we lose all sympathy. And it's not right. It's not right, Woody, but we're going to do it anyway.
It's okay, guys. I'm just happy to be home because the airline that I was flying on has a wildcat strike going on with their mechanics and engineers, and I was the last flight home.
Oh, again, can you imagine, Darren, if his flight was canceled and he had to spend another week surfing in Hawaii? That would have just been terrible.
Well, I'll pile onto that and tell you that the work stoppage has affected National Hockey League free agency and how teams are dealing with it. The draft was in Vegas. Teams going back to Canada for free agency had a couple of flights canceled and just decided, we're not going to take a chance that half our guys are in Canada and half our guys are in Vegas waiting to get a flight. We're just going to set up shop in Vegas for the first day and a half of free agency.
There you go.
Now, imagine making that call saying, no, we're stuck in Vegas. We can't come back because of the strike. And that's what at least a couple of teams have done in the National Hockey League instead of going back to Canada.
But most importantly, they may have screwed a bunch of NHL teams. They got Woody home in time to do this podcast, and that's what matters.
That would have been fun just to get the video at the airport of Woody being told he can't get back to do the podcast. Sorry, you can't get back to do what? Just set up Wi-Fi.
Pretty sure he could have handled the podcast from the Lanai in Hawaii.
There may have been one, all radio now is simulcast on, streamed, live streamed. There may have been one of my weekly radio appearances with, I believe, the guys from Edmonton ahead of Game 7. I do a Monday show there, and that just happened to be Game 7, and so I wasn't skipping that one. And it may have been, in their words, the greatest backdrop for an interview they've ever had.
We should touch on Game 7. But before we do that, Logan Thompson goes to Washington, and LT partners with Charlie Lindgren, and that's a new look of a tandem. Neither guy was thought of as a number one at the start of last year, and now they're 1A, 1B, or is it Lindgren's the starter and Logan, who asked for a trade out of Vegas to get more playing time, is he the backup, or is he a guy that could push?
I would say that Charlie earned the starting job based on his performance last year and the fact he took that starting job away from Darcy Kemper. But I think in today's National Hockey League, there's no such thing as a workhorse. Like, you're playing 30 regardless. Like, even the elite guys are being penciled in for 55 tops, which leaves 27 games. So even if you're around 52-30 split, like, you're going to get an opportunity to play. And I think there were times like Charlie really dug in there admirably for Washington down the stretch. But I think you could argue, and we saw it with some of the other teams that, had a guy come in and do the job for the first time at that level and earn the job for the first time at that level. But as they were asked to play more and more and more down the stretch, there were some speed wobbles there. So, having somebody there that they trust in Thompson and let's not forget, Logan Thompson, first team he signed with out of Brock University, was in the Washington Capitals organization. So there's some familiarity there. And so, I think he's going to get an opportunity to play. I will say the one guy, and we'll see what happens in free agency, which starts the day after we record this, but one guy I feel a little bit bad for that I thought might get that opportunity. I thought it earned it. Back-to-back Calder Cup championships, goalie of the year in the American Hockey League was Hunter Shepard, who we've had on the podcast before. And, he just does nothing but win at the American Hockey League level. I thought he had some good games when he was up in the NHL last year and a little bit this year. And I thought it might be his chance to get that opportunity alongside Charlie. But evidently they felt they needed to go in a different direction. And it is a double left-handed direction.
The frustration level's there for the athlete knocking on the door. Why be extra patient? Why? Because you can't do it really anymore from a winning perspective. And we see this idea of doubling down on time in the American Hockey League.
Well, I think he's a UFA, so like this was a choice. They went in a different direction. So I
didn't realize that.
I believe Hunter's a UFA, and I hope he gets an opportunity, with some NHL component to it, because he's, I think this might be a size thing, right? Like it always seems to come back to that so often, and yet all the guy does, not just win, because Hershey's a good team, like because there are guys that win because they're on good teams, but like this guy is the goalie of the year down there. He's dominated for years. He's had great performances. And like I said, let's hope he gets more looks in the National Hockey League level, wherever he ends up next.
The whole idea of draft or acquire and develop, but that development aspect of building up skills within your organization, and then teams bypass it or take extra time with that player. Let's get into some communication. And we had a great email regarding the topic of the parent segment last week. And we love this because we just threw it out there. We didn't know the answer to this question. So, Hutch, can you walk us through what we asked the universe for answers to?
We did. We had a conversation last week about why I thought it was a good idea for young goaltenders to get experience as on-ice officials, as referees and linespeople. And in that, just happened to mention that referees are required to be in player skates. You can't, at least where we are around here, you can't wear goalie skates as an on-ice official. And I did mention that could be a little bit tough because already as goaltenders, we're in it for a slightly more expensive ride for gear. And so adding that on to the burden is a little bit tough. And one of our readers sent in a note, Stefan Sanders, thank you very much, all the way from Alaska, goaltender and a goalie coach, reminded us, makes all the sense in the world, doesn't it, that only player skates have that Achilles protector that goes up the back and covers the Achilles tendon. If that does get cut because somebody steps on you, nasty, nasty injury that takes a good year to recover from. And so, Stefan, thanks for sharing that with us. I'm sure you're absolutely right. Personally, I'd kind of like to see the young kids still get a bit of a waiver. I don't think a 6-year-old's going to cut your Achilles if they step on you. But regardless, it does make sense, and we got to look after the young kids out there. So that's the point of the rule. Thank you, Stefan. Anybody else wants to talk about the parent segment, parents@ingoalmag.com, or anything at all in relation to InGoal and the show, info@ingoalmag.com.
I made a boo-boo. Someone told me Hunter Shepard was a UFA. He's not. He's got 1 year left in Washington, so he could still be in the mix there.
Well, as you've said so many times, right? It takes 3 or 4 even goaltenders at the NHL level, so he's going to get his shot.
And you know what?
Yeah, and
there's a lesson there, because I could have easily said, and I'm not too big of a person to admit that I haven't done this in the past, but when you said he's a UFA, I could have said, oh yeah, that's right. I didn't realize that. I admitted I didn't realize that. And now I feel a little bit vindicated with that. Not that I was following Hunter Shepard's contract at all, but you don't automatically have to go, oh, I knew that. I was fully aware of that. Because if it's not right, then you're really exposed.
I'm just glad I looked it up because someone told me that, and
What made you look it up?
Yeah, your hesitation, because you're normally you're on top of these things, and the fact that you didn't know, I was like, and especially because it's a guy from Vegas going to Washington, I'm like, okay, maybe I should double check this because I typically look for myself, like I normally check these things, but I just took somebody's word for it, and I'm waiting for the tears to flow for Hutch here, but I've been busy for the last week. I wasn't looking stuff up while I was away. I wasn't pulling up I wasn't pulling up Cap Friendly while I was away.
To be fair, Woody sent me a whole lot more content to deal with than I expected to see while he was out there surfing. So thanks for hanging in there at night, Woody.
Cap Friendly is going away. Puckpedia, if anybody wants to follow that, that's the best site that I've found in the interim. I don't know whether somebody's going to start a new Cap Friendly, but Puckpedia has really done a good job of elevating their presence when it comes to salary cap information and player salary information. So follow that right now. It's fun. It's funny. Cap Friendly was acquired by the Washington Capitals, the people around that. So they've been really busy on the offseason front.
Yes. And listen, as Hutch said, like, you're going to need 3. So Hunter's going to continue to get opportunities with the Washington Capitals this year, just like he did last year. And all he did, like I said, all this guy does is win. So let's see where it goes beyond that, right? Because Charlie Lindgren was on a 3-year deal. This is the final year coming up. LT, Logan Thompson, I believe, is on the last year of the deal.
Yes, he is.
So is Hunter Shepard. So maybe there's extensions coming. Maybe they look to re-up Charlie early. Maybe the same with Logan Thompson. We don't know. At the end of the day, they have 3 guys that I believe are capable of doing the job at the National Hockey League level. And that is a good problem to have for the Washington Capitals, even if, back to my original premise, I would have loved to have seen Hunter get that shot.
But they don't put all their pucks in the Hunter Shepard hockey bag and hope that he makes that step and is lights out. There's some insurance there.
Weren't we just talking about an extension for Calvin Pickard?
Yes.
Started in the American Hockey League, and now he's fresh off an extension in the NHL. So anything could happen. You just need an opportunity.
Amazing. You look at those 2 teams at the start of last year to where they are going into next year. A lot of things have transpired with goaltenders leaving, goaltenders coming up, goaltenders establishing themselves. A lot can happen. I know players get frustrated going, oh, when's my opportunity? It can happen really in the snap of a fingers.
Well, there's never been more volatility in the position, which makes some of the moves we've seen interesting. We haven't gotten to Linus Ullmark going to Ottawa, but he's only got a year left on the deal. We've got free agency coming up. Like, I hate to say this because every time I do, I'm waiting for the knock on the door to come take away my goalie union card. But with all this volatility, the one thing I'm avoiding if I'm a general manager, unless I've got a lock fire, I know this guy is one of the few that we would truly call elite goaltenders, I'm probably avoiding term.
Well, what do you do with Shesterkin then?
Yes.
He's going to reset the market probably, and I would be nervous about it. I mean, the guy who sort of, I thought, reset the market last summer was Ilya Sorokin because he got 8.5. Because for the longest time, we saw guys like Demko sort of coming up to that stage and taking 5. Like guys were up 5, 5.6. Even Jacob Markstrom, as the premier unrestricted free agent a couple of years ago, got 6. I think Sorokin reset the bar at 8.5, but then he wasn't their starter when game 1 of the playoffs came. Like, that's the volatility I'm talking about. Do you look at that and go, okay, well, the market's 8.5 and Shesterkin's going to get more? Do you look at it and go, can we really be spending that on goaltending if there's this much swing in it from year to year?
Let's talk about spending some money on skates, on your wheels, with the Hockey Shop gear segment, thehockeyshop.com, and Source for Sports Langley with the True Catalyst line. And there's a lot of numbers in play here, but this is the line that players and goaltenders can really dive into.
It's the stock version for True, so you can walk into the store and get it off the rack. Catalyst line, 9x4 is the high end. It goes down, I believe, 7x4 and 5x4. We talked quickly about all of them with Cam. Rather than me explain it, because we don't do a lot of stuff with True, so we don't get product to test ourselves where I can get out on the ice and validate it and tell you whether it's yay or nay for me. Let's just let Cam fill you in on all the details in our weekly gear segment.
Welcome back to the Hockey Shop Source of Sports. I'm over in Goalie Utopia with Cam Matwiv and the new True skates, Catalyst skates. I'm always having a little trouble with
There you go.
The nomenclature changes a fair bit. This is the 9x4 Catalyst skate, all new.
Correct.
From True.
Correct.
Cam, walk me through. Oh, that was good. I could have a rap album. All new, True, walk me through. I rhyme.
Wow. Welcome back to the Hockey Shop Source of Sports. I'm Cam, he's Kevin, and today we're talking about the Catalyst True Skate. Look at that double intro. So, brand new, continuing off of the success of the TF series of skates. We have some major differences between the TF7, TF9. There's now 3 price points, which is definitely worth talking about. New technical price point with the 9X skate. So let's dive into that one first.
So that's the top end.
This is now
Catalyst,
the new top end.
9X4, that's the new True top end skate.
Correct. So, again, they want to take a lot of their thermal moldability and overall customizable fit to a bit of a degree from their custom skates and brought that down into what would be their stock line of skates that we're seeing here.
Okay, so hold on. This is the top stock off the wall option from True. Want to make sure we still clarify. You can still order the full custom, the 1-piece,
2-piece.
There you go.
Yes.
This is sort of at the store, walk in.
This is giving you the ability to get that custom fit.
Retail.
Yes, correct. So again, that super thermal moldable composite that they've been using still makes its return back in. Some added durability features right off the bat because they definitely are 100% worth touching on. Let's look at the back of the skate first, right off the bat. So before, we had exposed carbon all the way through the back. You maybe seen some heel cracking issues with the older TF series, especially in the TF9. A lot of that happened was as you're swinging and contacting the post, or even your skate blade contacting the back of that skate as well. Was starting to weaken that carbon, punch holes through it, created some cracking issues.
How is my skate blade touching the back of the skate blade?
So if you swing,
other skate?
Correct.
Oh.
Yes.
Some of us don't ever do that, Cameron.
You'd be surprised at the amount of people that do.
Okay.
Even that leather strip along the back with some extra padding as well can make all of that difference. It's now creating a new contact surface, a new impact surface to helping reduce some of those cracking issues that we did see. So again, True Listen, saw it right off the bat.
Crack the code.
Crack the code as they've
Getting rid of the cracks.
of getting got them. So side of the skate as well, we do see less of that exposed carbon. More of that full wrap, actually a feature they did find in their custom skates on the upper price point as well. Again, creating some protection for the outer side of the skate where we did see some wear issues before on the previous models. So let's talk about the fit of the skate and also a cool new feature. So Nano Fit is, again, that talking about that thermomoldable technology.
Nano Fit.
Okay,
yes. So that's in, you got the high end. Does it I'm holding the second price point. Does it exist there?
It exists in the second price point as well. To know. Yes. So the cool factor of this skate is their new hinge. So their motion cuff is what they are calling it. So it's actually an insert that goes along the first two eyelets of the skate itself, allowing forward flexion when that goalie is now flexing and putting pressure forward.
Hold on. So there's an insert. I'm just talking
about the actual cuff of the skate itself. So plastic piece now comes through. First two eyelets, that's where its connection is. Now it's creating that forward flex when you do create that pressure on. So
this isn't flexing. This is not all that's flexing. It's giving you the ability to flex forward in the tongue.
On the inside, not on the tongue. It's actually inside the skate itself. So you will feel that overall.
There's a moving piece in there.
There's a moving piece in there.
Okay, good to know.
So you will find that on the 9X, 7X, not the 5X, because again, we got to take something out as we're going to tiered at the price point.
That's the third price point down the 5X there. So it doesn't exist. It exists in the top two. So, I mean, this solves for, we see it right up in the NHL. Most of the goalies wearing true don't do up top laces on their skates to try and establish a little forward flex and get a little mobility rather than being so locked in that you worry about injuries. So a lot of guys just don't do up the top two. This gives you the ability to sort of maintain a little more connection and a bit of forward flex. That's a great play by
I wouldn't be ripping still all the way up to the top eyelet super, super tight by any means, but it still might potentially allow that ability to that top eyelet, but still back it off a little bit with some extra slack.
Okay, I like it.
Overall, one other good call out, this is something that changed
cool. I like this.
On their custom skates. Now has been brought into their stock lineup. So we see that little indent that's actually at the toe of the skate. So what that will fit perfectly is actually the post. So as you're going to go now push off, you can hinge yourself into that post and push off with your
basically just create a little gap for to be on the post.
That's correct.
So in theory, your toe box, your pad up, ceiling. Like it. I like that. That's cool. That's innovative.
So as we're starting to tier down through the lineup, we see their DLC. So that's our carbon coated steel on the 9X.
So the top end 9X4, better steel. This is
just a regular stock stainless steel on the 7X4.
And then we get into the 5X4, the lowest price point.
And then we start to see more differences in terms of the overall liner of the skate itself. And again, we don't have that same hinge flex on the 5. But the 7X has that.
Nice.
So great options from True. If you want to give us a call, talk about it a little bit more, 604-589-8299 or 1-800-567-7790. Once again, custom is still available. Nothing has changed there. So if, say, these stock fits don't work for you, obviously there's that ability to go custom.
But within the stock fit, there still is a fair amount of, because of the thermal molding, custom fit in terms of shaping it around your foot.
That's correct.
In store once you buy.
That's correct.
Nice. True. Catalyst, 9X4, 7X4, 5X4. Their new lineup, some new innovative features. If you got any questions, make sure you give Cam a call or check them out at thehockeyshop.com.
Boots, personal preference. Catalyst has got plenty of options for you in that true line of skate, and there's also options with the different manufacturers. The tuck is something that I always look at. The holder, you guys call it the holder, I call it the tuck, and I always think, am I being too much of a nerd when I consider how I'm going to put my toe ties through the tuck, and not just whether or not it's a good, comfortable boot?
Actually, I've never heard that question raised, Darren, but I think it's a really important one. And
are you just saying that because I'm here?
No, let me finish. I'm actually thinking about young goaltenders, especially because, we get the elastic ones because they want to make it easier to tie up. If you're a parent down there and you don't wind it around just so, it ends up under the blade and causes problems in games. And so I actually think having the right holder, especially at a younger age, is a bigger deal than maybe we think. We'll have to do some tests.
I like this. I like this conversation. I do remember, and this is one of the things that since going back to skate lace as my toe tie and just sticking with skate lace, but I remember when we were, and as we test various gear companies, using the Velcro attachment, so sort of tie the top of the skate laces above your actual skate laces. Some of the holders, the gap for you to stick those big Velcro tabs through was it was tight, it was small, and
the
it was
true
tough
one
to get
piece,
them through.
you had trouble getting those things through, the little circles.
Yeah, so there you go. That's something that I remember sort of thinking about at the time and haven't thought about since, because I've gone back to skate lace, but it's it's certainly something that we need to maybe revisit and have a look at.
Nothing like the layman over here bringing things back to reality.
Bill Layman, the only guy who faces NHL shooters in the group here. Come on now.
Yeah, we could get the layman back to using skate lace like the rest of us, and we'd be no problems.
As I tell Kelly McCrimmon all the time, he's like, "Are you crazy doing that?" And I say, "I'm in the safest spot in the rink, right in the middle of the net. Nothing touches me. If I moved over to a post where the pucks are going off and in, I'd be in danger of actually being hit by one of those rockets. So I'm all good." The parent segment brought to you by Stop It Goaltending You, the app. Just diving into a really delicate situation that you're going to have to encounter if you play any length of time of any sport and you're a goaltender, is dealing with teammates who make a mistake or craziness, put the puck in the net behind you by accident. So how do you navigate that? And before we get to it, the Stop It Goaltending You, the app, continues to make a great impact on the goaltending world.
Well, that's because it's the world's most comprehensive app for goalies, goalie parents, and goalie coaches. Stop It Goaltending You, the app, is of course available at stopitgoaltending.com, at the App Store for all you Apple users, and at the Google Play Store for the Android users. This app has everything from quick daily primers to extensive deep dive videos. I was taking a look in the past week. The quick primers were the 5 steps of a training cycle. So helping goalies understand the different steps of going through a training cycle as opposed to just doing it, like understanding how it works and how you benefit the most from it. What I love about the app is, well, there's 2 things I love. The first thing is that you can just go through and do the daily primers, quick hits here and there. You can dive deep into the longer segments and the longer videos. And of course, what I love the most about the app is that it comes with a free subscription to InGoal magazine. Now, anytime you download and purchase the Stop It Goaltending You, the app, from, like I said, Google Play, Apple Store, or at stopitgoaltending.com, you get a free subscription to InGoal magazine. Best of both worlds. Best way to become a better goaltender is to make sure you're reading both.
I love the daily primers. I do. But this idea of giving me some structure on a training cycle and a roadmap is outstanding.
We agree.
Would you use it?
There's a lot of things in my life that I should use and don't use, Darren, including a dangler. But, yes, but I watched it, so I guess I will be using it. That's the beauty. If you just take these little snippets and you just sort of absorb it, you can, you're going through it later on. And you're like, oh yeah, I remember why this is important. I need to make sure I focus on this, as opposed to making it a daily part of my checklist. I just absorb it and make it a part of my life.
We should put up our training plans.
I plan to train someday.
It can be nasty situations that happen on the ice that aren't planned out and just go awry. And you don't have to be a goaltender necessarily to handle this, but you are the person that's dealing with the end result of the different decisions or actions in front of you. So how do you handle it, Hutch?
Well, yeah, teammates. And one nice thing about the great teammates that InGoal and Stop It are is that I'm pretty sure that Brian DeCord is never going to tuck a puck in behind me in a game. They're always there supporting us, as our regular teammates are. Sometimes things happen out on the ice, as you say, Darren. And as parents, we have to be there to support our kids. We're, in many senses, their most important coach, especially on the mindset side, I really believe. And we have to help guide them through some of these situations, especially the youngest goaltenders. And as I mentioned before, at the Tendy Fest Q&A with Bill Ranford, he had a great response to a question along these lines. And I'll get to that in a second. In fact, we'll even listen to Bill share that idea with us. But yeah, it's pretty common to see young goaltenders being frustrated with their teammates. And, maybe Maybe it's something as simple as they've given up a few too many goals in a game and they're upset at the defense for maybe not having a great game. They're upset at some teammates who are more interested in offense than in back checking. Get used to it, kids. All roads lead to beer league, and one day you're going to have beer league teammates that never back check. But look, the general advice that we're all given as goaltenders that we want to share with our kids is don't show that frustration. Don't lift your head up and throw your arms up in the air as if you want to tell the whole world, what did you want me to do there? Don't yell at your teammates. Don't give them the stare down. Worse still, don't start arguing with them on the ice. I did once see in beer league a goaltender get in a fight with his own defenseman. That is not where we want to go. It
wasn't a fight. We just disagreed for a second.
A legit throwdown. So yeah, we know we don't want them doing all that. What do you want them to do when when there's a mistake out there? Look, the fact is, it's our job to be there when our team makes mistakes. And yes, some teams and some players make more mistakes than others, but it's the job we signed up for. So we need to accept that and play with the hand that we've been dealt. As we've just come off the NHL draft, I think it is worth pointing out that we've all spoken to lots of scouts and general managers who absolutely care about your demeanor on the ice. They've told us many times that they want unflappable goaltenders who don't show emotion. They want to see goalies battle, but they want them battling to stop the puck, not with their teammates or anybody else on the ice, frankly. So, as I've said, as parents, I think it's important for us to make our kids aware of this. But more importantly, as I often say, we want to catch them being good and reinforce that best behavior that they have. So praise your kids when they don't overreact to a goal, when they don't react at all to a goal, for example, when they don't outwardly get angry when they have a tough game or when a teammate has a tough game in front of them. Because not only is it going to upset you, not only is it going to upset your team, but frankly, it's going to distract from your focus and having the right mindset to play your best. And I'm sure our good friend Pete Fry would back that up as well. But rather than just tell you my thoughts, I wanted to share this clip we were talking about with you. When at the Tendy Fest Q&A, Bill was asked a question by a young goaltender who said, "What do I do when my teammate scores on me?" And I think he was probably implying that it happens a fair bit. And it does happen more and more in the game today, guys, doesn't it? Defenses are collapsing around the net. The higher up in the game you get as you start working towards, U18 and junior, and obviously in the National Hockey League, defensively teams collapse around the net and more pucks are getting knocked in off of their own teammates. Bums, shin pads, skates, sticks, especially when they try and get that stick in a lane and stop a shot from coming towards the net or a pass across the net front, and things end up going behind you that you don't want. It's going to keep happening as you go up in the game, guys. So what do you do? Kind of, it's rubbing salt in the wound and how are we going to handle it? So I would just first like to let everybody listen to Bill's response because I think it was perfect.
Really good question. How do I deal with teammates that put the puck into my... You know what? Everybody makes mistakes. So the one thing I know I don't do is I don't stare at them or make everybody in the building know that they've put the puck in the net. What I might do is when you get a chance, either between periods or if you get a chance, go to the bench and just give them knuckles. Feel you, man. Tough break. But don't give the hands up in the air and stare at the guy like, can't believe you put in the net. That's... Everybody make mistakes. And then maybe the next time when you make a mistake, he's going to come and give you a pat on the back and like, you got the next one. That's how I approach it.
So Bill's response there, guys, wasn't it really just the golden rule? He wants everybody just to give their defenseman, if he knocks the puck in behind you, a pat on the back and say, yep, sometimes it happens. What I really liked, though, about what Bill said is it wasn't just going over and pat him on the back where the whole world can see you in the middle of a game. It was wait until you're over on the bench, wait until it's just a quiet moment. It's just the two of you and just say, hey, don't worry about it. Things happen and they happen to me too. I got your back. I'll get the next one. So I think that's fabulous advice, whether you're upset that your team has had a tough game, whether you're upset a specific play where one of your teammates has put the puck in behind you. Encourage your goaltender to accept responsibility, to do everything they can to stop every puck, to remain cool and calm when adversity strikes. And when a teammate makes that mistake that costs you, be understanding because that's what you want them to be with you. The last thing I was just going to tell everybody, guys, is just if your kids aren't listening to the podcast in the car with you right now, as so many do, play this clip from Bill because I think it's a fantastic thing for young goaltenders to listen to. Or next week when it comes out, listen to the whole Q&A because they're probably going to listen to a 4-time Stanley Cup winner far more than they will to the three of us.
I usually just tell my teammates, you finally got one.
I go with, what would Woody do? And then I chirp my teammates too. So I've got to adopt some of what Hutch is saying.
I don't think I've seen Woody chirp his own teammates, but I've seen him go after referees and opposing players.
Listen, I'm too busy fighting the puck to fight anyone else. That's the reality these days.
I kind of like it if there's a screw up goal. Then I'm like, that wasn't my fault. That's good. And nobody's even going to think that on the bench. I just got a free one.
You know, you're kind of right, but when games get tough and now you're already behind and you've already feel like maybe you're not having your best game, and then you get that tough break.
Easy to go, come on, guys.
You know, geez, it's bad enough without this happening. So, but as we say, we just have to let the bounces happen and stay calm because that's what everybody wants to see. And that's what helps you become a better goaltender too.
My favorite line to my teammates in men's league, because we all end up there. But the odd time when it isn't my fault, my defenseman or forward will stand beside me getting the puck out of the net and they'll go, sorry, that's my bad. And I'll just look at them and go, well, it wasn't my fault. And then there's laughter and joking and we get back into it. But the new guys, every time we'll get a new person out and they're looking at me going, what's this guy talking about? It's not my fault.
My favorite one's when I leave a puck for a defenseman and then he makes a terrible pass and it's a turnover. And mid-game, I just look at him and say, I could have made that pass.
So, yeah. Just deal. I'm stealing that.
Could have shortcut the turnover and just done it myself.
I'm stealing that from you. So, Woody, we've got something that we can digest here from Hutch.
Valuable life lessons as goaltenders, and all joking aside, important ones. And it was nice to hear Bill's reaction and his words. As I love that Hutch used that as part of the parent segment because you could see the impact that his response and the way he engaged with the kids. You could see that impact directly at Tendy Fest. Just how, jokes aside, Hutch talked about listening to him more than the three of us, but you really could see how intently these kids were listening to his advice.
It wasn't the only good bit of parental advice in there either. There were 3 or 4 really good sound bites for parents to listen to.
Incredible amount of resources in the history of InGoal Radio, the podcast, but the on-ice presentation by Bill and then the off-ice Q&A is fabulous. It's right up there with the best available interaction that anybody can have with goaltending, whether it's parent or whether it's the goaltender itself. So well done, you guys. Awesome job. Thanks to Bill for that as well. Let's get into some current National Hockey League experiences with our feature interview brought to you by NHL Sense Arena. Alex Lyon standing by, making his way into our studio with NHL Sense Arena and the progress of the metaverse and what we're doing there. The ability to train is extravagant.
I don't know if you noticed it while you were watching the draft. Guess it depends whose feed you're watching. And unfortunately, I can't remember the goaltender who had just been selected, but the announcers here on the Sportsnet feed in Canada mentioned how much they loved this young man because he does everything he can to be a better goalie, not just the things everybody else is doing, like hitting the weight room and juggling balls, but they mentioned that he uses virtual reality tools to help him learn to make more saves, and even said he was having a tough year. Halfway through the year, got into the VR and turned his season around and had a great year. And now he's an NHL drafted goaltender. I wish I could remember who it was, but congratulations to that young man and all of the goaltenders who were drafted yesterday. Of course, the TV folks are a little bit behind the rest of us here at InGoal and in the goalie world because they acted like this is very uncommon and not taking away anything from that goaltender, because he is one of the many goalies staying on top of using the best tools. But in fact, there's a decent chance he might have even learned about it from listening to this podcast. But we know that there's a lot of goaltenders doing that now. Goalies like Joey Decord in the National Hockey League using NHL Sense Arena, and his game day warm-up is actually one of the many training plans that all of us can use on Sense Arena, the very same training plan that he uses. As we learned in the draft, we know that all the best young goaltenders that are coming up through the system are now trying things like NHL Sense Arena to make themselves the best goaltenders that they can. And just as the announcer was so impressed at the mindset of this young goaltender to do all this, I think you should pick up on something there and realize that you shouldn't be shy and hide the fact that you use tools like NHL Sense Arena, because the top people in the game now are noticing people who do that. And they'll know that you're one of the ones that's doing everything they can to be their best. So give Sense Arena a try. Head over to sensearena.com and you'll learn everything you need to about this great tool. And head over to the MetaQuest store in your headset and give it a go.
To Alex Lyon. Woody.
I just think we got to roll this and tell you how good this interview was and let you listen for yourself and feel free to hit us up and tell us that we were right. Alex goes everywhere with this one. An interesting background, gets into his roots in minor hockey in Minnesota, his inspirations, the guys he's played with and what he's taken from them. He gets into his equipment and how the way he does up his toe ties, speaking of, using skate laces and gaps, actually helps him achieve a wider butterfly, a more 5-hole coverage. That was fascinating. And that's probably enough. Let's just leave that tease right there. Everybody's going to want to listen for that alone. But I think I think this is one of those ones where our listeners are going to come out of this with like 6 or 7 really solid takeaways that they either implement in their game or take with them to the rink from a mindset standpoint. Alex was fantastic, a great guest, and I really enjoyed having him on. And make sure you check out his pro reads at ingoalmag.com as well.
It's the NHL Sense Arena feature interview on InGoal Radio, the podcast. Kevin Whitley with Alex Lyon.
Really excited to welcome to the InGoal Radio podcast, first-time guest, long overdue, Alex Lyon. I had a chance to catch up with you a little bit in the locker room when the Red Wings came through town here in Vancouver this season, and so I've been kind of excited and looking forward to this because I know you are a student of the position, a student of the game. I guess first off, just catch us up. I was sorry to see you leave the World Championships because of injury and rolling when you did. How was that experience other than the way it ended, and how are things going for you in terms of the way the summer looks?
It was good. It was good. I just had a cut on the hand and no splints off. So feels pretty good. It's on a good track and life is good. I was disappointed to leave. I think obviously I went, not obviously, but I went 10 years ago, actually, when I was in Prague in Ostrava then. That was when I was a sophomore in college. And it was kind of a cool full circle experience for me because at that point, I didn't know up from down, didn't know anything about, I look back and I thought I knew everything, one of those types of things. And then this time, just the comfortability, obviously you play in a long time, and just the ability to kind of have a control of the destiny and a control of the outcome of a team gives you a lot more confidence than if you're just kind of sitting around. So it was a cool experience in that way. I really got to judge it 1 year, and then 10 years later got to do it again.
I feel like a lot of this conversation is going to be how Alex Lyon has evolved and changed between the pipes, between the ears, mentality, mindset in those 10 years. But just that experience this time, did you have to, and I'm sorry for not knowing this, but did you have to come back after the injury right away, or did you have a chance to stick around? Yeah. And, I think of a young guy like Trey Augustine, who's in the same organization as you. Are you passing on life lessons because having had that 10-year period, or are you letting him figure it out on his own?
Yeah, no, I came back right away. It's just to dot my I's and cross my T's with the hand and get, the top medical attention I could find and get Detroit's opinion, stuff like that. So that was kind of a necessity. But if you want to jump into the Trey Augustine conversation, I could really talk about him for a while.
Okay.
He's actually, and every young goalie is inexperienced and they can't gain experience. It's not to no fault of their own, but he is about as spot on as I think a 21, or I don't even know, was he 19? He's got it going on. And I'm sure that better than me. You probably have watched him. That was my first experience with him. I'd never even seen him play. But he knows what's going on between the ears and physically. So I couldn't have been more impressed by the guy.
It's funny. We had him on the podcast last year, I think sometime around after the draft, and just the way he thinks the position seems to be really mature for the age.
Yeah, and you can tell it's it's almost like, because I'm sure you get a feel for this talking about different guys of different ages, but everybody's arc is similar. It just depends on when it starts and then how it goes. But like, so I look at him and I look at my 25, 26-year-old self, where it's like the things that he's understanding and figuring out now and unlocking those keys are things that I didn't see for a long time, 5, 6, 7 years after he did. And I think that's where I was most impressed. It was like, this is a mature individual with a good temperament who is on the right path. And if he just, it's like anything, if you get injured or life or whatever, there's a lot of things that can derail it. But he's on the right path, and that's as good as you can do.
Okay, so you talked about your age 25, 26 season. Let's go into, how you got involved in the game and in the position. And, obviously there's stories about growing up on an island, and let's make sure we get those right. But like, how much of that is just you grew up sort of not in a place where a lot of those things would be on hand for you to access, coaching and sort of where you are now from where you are there, and sort of maybe, I don't say lack of preparation, Alex, I don't think that's the right term, but maybe sometimes a lack of those same resources that Trey has sort of been like streamlined into this from a very young age.
I look at it and I've thought about it a lot. I think it's really interesting for me because I look at myself and say I'm 6 feet tall, not a really gifted physical human being, not a good jumper, not a really like naturally thick lower half, never been a good runner. I've always been very athletic, good feel, good hands, but never like walk into the gym and it's like this guy's exploding out of the gym type of guy.
Okay.
And so I think, like you said, I grew up in Baudette, Minnesota, never thought I would play professional or anything like that, but I was always really good. Obviously, like probably the best player on our team. And then in high school, I was really good. But I think one thing that was probably really, really good for me is that I learned how to stop the puck and win games and play with the team. And I don't honestly know if I would be where I'm at now if I didn't have 18 years of that. I think that it would have put guardrails on my game that I couldn't have discovered those intricacies of being an elite competitor and just letting my game speak for itself. And I tell this to everybody, but I'm a puck stopper first and I'm a goalie second. I'm out there to stop the puck. And this was always a great quote from Rob Tallis, who's been in Florida forever. But he always just said, you have one job, and it's to keep the puck out of the net. Everything else comes after that, but that's your job. And if you're desperate to do that, it's a very powerful thing. Rather than, oh man, I hope my edges are good today. I hope my hips are in place and that's kind of what you're alluding to, obviously, about being a goalie school goalie. But I really think that did help me a lot in my career. I think that we would most professional, I mean, you would probably agree with this, that it's kind of becoming a problem, maybe the shifting too far the other way of, hey, when you're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, we're doing X drills and reverses and stuff like that. And I just learned how to stop the puck and win games. And I think also naturally very competitive human being, which has proven to be a great resource for me as well.
Okay, so how did it get started for you? Like, how did you end up being a goalie, and then obviously develop that competitive nature? But where were the first sort of this is what I love. This is what I love to do. How did that all start for you?
Pretty standard, honestly. Like just the classic goalie rotation, throw a kid in, and then I actually played, and I was really good. Like it was like, okay, there's something he's just like understands. It just comes, I think, naturally to some people. Not saying that I'm like Freddie Anderson, natural level, that type of thing, but I think it came a little more naturally to me. I think I just loved hockey. I spent all day at the rink, grew up in a town where I was lucky enough, like the rink was just open all day, all night. So I would have my mom drop me off there and I would spend the day, whether it was alone or with friends, or I had no really agenda of like spending time with friends. I just loved skating. I would play player as much as I could. I played player a lot more actually growing up until I was probably 14 or 15. I got into high school, but until then, like I would skate out at every open skate. I think that is one thing that maybe helped me a lot. And I just love hockey, and I still love it. There's been obviously points I think like for everybody, but you fall out of love with it at times and you hate it at times. And when it's January, you hate it. But that's what I always come back to is I love playing the game and I love playing goalie and I really love getting better at goalie. That's my addiction. So I think I'm really lucky in that way.
I love the phrase about not putting guardrails on your game. So when you got to a point, and I don't know if that was in high school, where all of a sudden there was a goalie coach, how did you, like, there's two things there, right? Not putting guardrails on early on was important to develop the puck stopping, the ability to win, the competitiveness. But then you say you love the position and all those things. How did those things start to come together for you when you first got a goalie coach, or even throughout the years in terms of finding that balance between what made you who you are and some of the, I mean, it's always evolving, right? The position's always changing.
Yeah, I think, really enjoying hockey, it goes back to that a lot because even when I was, probably 10, 12, whatever, all the way to the point past that, I loved watching. I would watch and I would learn, and I would watch and I would learn. And my first experience with the goalie coach was when I was in Omaha in juniors. They had a goalie coach there. I battled him really hard. I fought him, and it's funny because that's still like a calling card of Alex Lyon. You could probably talk to any goalie coach I've had and they say like, yeah, he's kind of miserable to work with. But I just think that like retaining those aspects of my game, like we just talked about, like playing freely, being a competitor, playing to win the game are more important and always supersede being a goalie. And so like that first goalie coaching experience I had, it was tough for me because we're going over video and all this. And I'm like, I understand how to play the game. I know how to win games. I know how to play. I have a great feel. Just don't throw me off that. And then I got to Yale. We had a full-time goalie coach there, and same thing. Like we battled, but at the same time, it was never like, oh, I don't want to get better. I don't want to learn. It's just, I was just very like secretive and felt like I knew what made me good. And then it was interesting when I got to Philly right away. I think I had a little bit less confidence there, but I really worked with the goalie coaches like hard and really trained my game in a very classical, like we kind of think of as goalie school goalies now. I really, really leaned into that for probably like 3 years, where I was playing the game as a goalie first and a competitor second. It wasn't the greatest experience for me in Philly, but the guys there, I don't know if you know them, Kim Dillabaugh and
I know Kim, Brady. They used to. I mean, sure. I know Kim and Brady dating back to, obviously Ian Clark was the guy who introduced me to the game,
right? And
back when he had GDI schools, Kim and Brady were both involved, so I know them both well.
And they both see the game very much through that lens, which is what it is, and. But they really taught me, okay, this is the very, very technical side. And so I was really grinding on that for, like I said, 3 or 4 years. And it wasn't the best experience for me in Philly, but it put certain guardrails on my game where then I had to figure out how to marry those two sides of being very technical while also being very competitive and figuring out how to use your emotions and use your brain in the right way. And so I think that was very good for me, and probably created some longevity for me. And it's funny because as I get older, I find myself reverting back to my 15-year-old self. I try more and more to tap into that. I try to get less away from the rigidity of goaltending. But again, it's just always a balance. And as you know, it's like some guys lean on the very technical side. Some guys, I'm naturally I like being competitive and winning the game. And if those are the things I'm focusing on, usually good things happen.
Okay, I was gonna say, like I feel like goaltending, like what I love about it, what's made me passionate about it is like we're like 260 something episodes in, and there is no one way to do it, right? Like there is no everything is a sliding scale, between technique and feel, like all the different aspects. Everybody sort of has a different spot on the scale and they all combine in different ways. When you talk about the rigidity of sort of the more structured approach to the more freeing competing part and finding that balance, like, are there any examples you can give me where you're learning a new technique? Because at a certain point, some of that technical stuff will allow you to get to spots to compete faster. Is there an example you can find that you remember there? It's like, yeah,
you put it, you just nailed it on the head. And that's what I think about a lot is, how do I allow my technique to creep into my game just enough so that you can then play completely freely without thinking? And that's what you're talking about, right? Everybody's trying, and that's kind of the flow state. Obviously, that's what we're all trying to achieve.
Right.
But for sure, some technical things, especially, I'm a big believer that post play is maybe the most critical part of the technical side of goaltending. If you can operate on your posts, in and around your posts, the game is so extremely fast and players are so dang good and smart. Players, I don't know if you can feel this as well, but players are starting to think like goalies, and they're starting more and more to understand why goalies do the things they do, which is really smart. And there's still it's still like unknown to a lot of players. I would never sit down with a player and be like, this is what you should do, because that's just obviously like giving the answers to the test. But they're getting way smarter. And so it's like, then you have to figure out ways to do that. I think post play, if you can have great post play, and I think that's a calling card of all of the goalies who have been really good for a long time, post play, because that's a lot of where the game is played. So for sure, that technical side of like, if I can just get this super habitual, but yeah, I work on post play probably most of my technical time on the ice, I would say.
Oh, that's interesting, because as I was clipping video to hopefully do a pro reads after we wind this down, was so impressed with how well, and we think of post play. I don't think but I'd say like the general public looks at things like reverse, and all they see is the times where maybe it doesn't work or a guy picks a spot on and exploits it.
Yes.
And like, to me, it was the entries and the exits and how you're getting to spots off your posts and low high plays. Because you're right, players have figured out how to attack us, and they are thinking, they're about 20 years behind, but they're getting there.
Yeah.
That those low high plays that take you into your post and force you to get off, your movement off it, just like, I was like, wow, this is impressive. So there's a great example where the technique allows you to get to the compete.
Right. That, I mean, and really the way that I look at it is like, okay, post play, a lot of the game is played around the post, whether it's wraps, short side. Like you said, those things are much more difficult than they look. And I think that that's where a lot of the disparity comes in, where it's like, it really doesn't feel great to be like, have your hip coiled and you're leaning into the post ready to explode. From a TV angle, it looks easy, but it's not a very painful, but it's not like a comfortable place to be. And so I think that's where a lot of the disparity comes in, where it's like, it's difficult on your body, but the guys at the top are so smooth and so good and make it look so easy that you could probably be like, well, why don't you just do this every time? It is a very difficult skill, I think. And I still have so much longer to go. But one of those types of things where you can just never be good enough at it.
Okay, so that brings a great question, and I get being at the USA Hockey National Goaltending Symposium, one of the topics of conversation, right? Like, we know we need to perfect it, or we need to get better at it, because it helps us move in and out and follow plays as they move around the zone. Post play is important, and yet we also know that the human body wasn't designed to butterfly, and it sure as hell wasn't designed for reverse VH. So as you're learning these new things, any tips along the way in terms of like, do you need to limit your reps in that, even when you're trying to perfect a new skill, or are there things you've learned in terms of training that have allowed your body to manage it better?
Yeah. Two things. One thing that really helped me was, and I think, I don't necessarily want to give this away too much, but I think that I think in 10, 15 years, you'll see every goalie going skate lace on post. I don't think that you'll see blade on post anymore, or shit. I mean, obviously shin on post has kind of disappeared for the most part.
Right.
But I think blade on post is a big problem.
You got to lean further over, right? There's a bigger gap.
But if you think about it, you're also bringing your foot in and wedging it into your body. And like you said, you're trying to lean over the top of that. Whereas if you can just go skate lace on post, your foot is completely extended. So all you have to do at that point is push instead of trying to push with your foot and then also drag it back at the same time. So like if you just have that one lever of pushing rather than it's wedged and you're dragging it along, I think that's really important. And I think that I think I see more and more people doing it all the time, but that helped me a lot. Another thing that really changed the way that I look at post play is working with Bob. He's by far the smartest goalie I've ever worked with, but he always just talked about how you want to make things as easy and repeatable as possible. And so it's going to be different for every person, how their body works, how their body connects to each other. But you should try to find ways to make things as easy as possible on yourself, because that's how you're going to get the most explosion, the best reaction time, the most comfortability. And that's ultimately what you're looking for as a goalie. It's just being comfortable in your own environment.
So you mentioned skate lace on post, and this has been a little bit of and I admit we had it wrong at the beginning. Like we saw gear companies, they're always evolving. They're always, bringing new things. And the idea of elastic toe ties seemed to make sense back in the day when we were worried about pads. You get out of the butterfly and that little elasticity would help them sort of snap back square rather than remain rotated, right? That was the thought process.
Right.
But then as this has evolved, we've sort of gone the other way, and we've said the same thing, like elasticity in that gap between the bottom of the skate and the toe of the skate and the bottom of the pad, like elasticity, inevitably, if I go in there, it's less, it's harder to get that spot because it's pulled tight. And then when I go to push off, there's give. So I'm curious, are you just like back to like knots and a specific length? How have you solved that from an equipment standpoint?
Yeah, length for sure. This is also a pretty good one that I think is very underutilized, but I'm going to throw it out there. One thing that is really, this really frustrates me, but I'm just going to go on a little tangent.
All right, here we go. I like it.
When your lace is whatever, even if it's this much off of your skate, like that's probably pretty standard. Maybe like, I don't know, here's the lid of a coffee cup. I'll give you a good reference here, but like maybe the skate lace is this far off the skate from the like pad.
2 inches,
whatever.
Maybe. Yep.
Pretty standard. It gets bigger and bigger.
Yep.
I'm 6 feet tall. I'm not mobile. I don't have a wide butterfly by any stretch of the imagination, but I actually move my toe tie. So it's probably like almost double the length of this coffee cup lid. And it creates an incredible amount of width in my butterfly that is not natural to my body. My pads fall off my feet. Like they're this far extended from my shin to my pad when I'm in my butterfly.
For the podcast folks, we're talking probably about like 5-6 inches there.
5-6 inches. And if you think about it, you go down on your knees and your knees are kind of like this with like a little bit of external or internal rotation with like you know how I'm saying, that feeling of like when your feet are flat, but your hips are internally rotated.
Yep.
It just creates a natural gap. So you can actually create a much bigger butterfly without stretching your hips, without putting extra pressure on your groins or your core. And it's just like that's for me, that's probably like 15 goals a year, maybe 10, 15 goals a year, where if it just
having the width, you mean?
Having the width. Yeah. And so it goes from here's your butterfly of your natural body to all of a sudden you're 3-4 inches on either side. Like that is an enormous amount of space in a place where shooters are shooting more all the time. 12 inches off the ice, hit the post, glove, right? Like that's the bread and butter now.
Yep.
As it should be. And so I just think that it really saves, I don't know. I'm not going to get into too much more, but I think that that's something that I hope goalies start to I don't know. I don't even know, because young goalies' hips are obviously much more wide and better than mine. So, but I do think that is a very effective way to create width in your butterfly without actually putting more strain on your body.
And it makes for easy entries and exits for you too, as we've talked about.
Right. And your pad sits very loose on your leg. It's something that's very hard to get used to. But once you're used to it and comfortable with it, it's a no-brainer. Well, and that's kind of...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's kind of like where I first thought about this is when Price, I would say like when he had the when he had the Vons, the red Vons with the cool flame logo.
Yes.
Maybe like 2 sets after that, like specifically the P4s where they were all white with a one red stripe, if you can
Yep.
remember those.
I got a picture of them on the wall here because we literally like were, and then when he launched eFlex, we were literally working with CCM at the time and like helping with the campaign. And I got it all here.
Yeah, but you remember like he had that look that everybody was trying to achieve where it was so tight to the knee and it sat like this high above his skate and it looked so cool. And his thigh rise came up to like his hip flexor and he was doing that when nobody else was doing that. And I just remember looking at that like, why is it like that? And it took me 2 years to figure out how to do that. But he was way ahead of the game. Obviously, like the knee, where the knee lands is so much more important than what happens around the foot. Anything with your pad below the knee, it honestly doesn't really matter that much. So that's kind of where I learned it, and I just figured it out, and it took me a long time, but I think that is a smart thing to do for sure.
Well, it's funny. So, because also the part of freeing that up was, remember, he was the first one to sort of take the elastic knee strap and put it down to the calf, as opposed to wrapping it around the knee and create a little freedom in that. And now that you're saying this, it reminds me, we have a video of him in the locker room from what we used to do on the ice every week, where I saw the same thing. The kids that came to the camp all got a brand new set of pads, CCM, and they weren't putting the knots in. And so I remember saying to Carrie after the first ice session, can you walk these kids through the how and why? And so we have this fantastic video of him in the locker room, basically sharing the exact same thing that you're sharing. And I'm thinking to myself, I really need to republish that and remind people that it's there, because all these years later, he was ahead of his time.
He was so far ahead of his time. I mean, and I learned some like other things from some other guys. Like, you know who actually Rels was really good with that? It was Dustin Tokarski, who was his backup.
He had huge yeah.
And he had huge, but you would never realize that he's 5'10" and a half. You know, he finds ways. And that's the ultimate, like the ultimate point is you finding ways to make yourself bigger while still moving with freedom as your natural human self.
And that takes a willingness to look at how other people are doing it. It takes a willingness to think about the game as much as you talk about, you know, like to think goalie. You talked earlier about loving to watch the game. Did you sounds like you're a guy that watched a lot of hockey. I feel like that's a little bit lost with the kids these days. They just watch the highlights and don't watch a lot of hockey.
I love watching hockey. So it's not a chore for me. Like, I'm a big believer in watching hockey. Just obviously, if you love the game, it's going to yield better results than if you don't. There's plenty of NHL players who hate hockey and hate watching hockey.
I've met a few. Yeah, I've met a few. Yeah. They're just really good at it.
They're just really good at it, and that's fine. I can't get away with that. You know, on some degree, I have to love the game in order to succeed to my maximum capacity. But I also think that it's like being an NFL quarterback, where you just create the Rolodex in your head of, I've seen this, I've seen this, I've seen this. Like you said with Mitch Korn, creating those trends. It's not that complicated. It's just a game of patterns, and it's like if you watch, and the more information and the more Rolodex pages I put in here, the better goalie I'm going to be. And I'm a big believer in that for sure.
And a lot of, like you said, a lot of people say, oh, wait, you talked about goalies not having experience, and until you get it, you don't have it. But you can in some levels sort of accelerate your ability to process and read the game, you know, just by watching it. I mean, I remember, you know, Thatcher Demko used to take notes. He had a notebook when he would watch hockey on Game Center. He told me before he would make notes on goalies and the way they did things. And you don't have to study it. Just watching it, it's going to add to that Rolodex you talked about.
Right. I don't know if you know this. I was actually Thatcher's goalie partner.
I was just going to ask you, because he said you played a really big role in his career in junior.
And I mean, it was mutual. He obviously was a student of the game, and he's a lot like Trey. You know, you could tell early, and I didn't know anything then. I was still in my first year USHL, but he's a student. But like you said, I think creating environments where you enjoy what you're doing, like Thatcher says that, but I also know Thatcher well enough that he probably enjoyed that to some degree. Like, he enjoyed doing that. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like,
it wasn't homework.
Mom's making me sit down and watch the game. Like, so I think just creating, I think that's helped me a lot. Just like, all right, let's let's just enjoy. I'm going to watch, like I try to do this every morning where I go, I'm going to watch all the goals from last night. Just watch them, enjoy it, see how the games went. And that's helped me a lot. And so I've watched, and now that I think about it, I've watched millions of goals, over the last 5 years, but it's probably good.
I love it. I love it. Okay, you mentioned Bob. Now I know Bob's also. I've had I think my favorite conversation ever was when he first got to Columbus and the PR guy warned. I said, "Hey, does he speak? Like, does he talk on after a practice day? Like, I didn't know where his English was at." And the PR guy said, "Yeah, you're welcome to try, but the English isn't, but you're welcome to try, right? Like he seems open to it." And within 5 minutes, we're literally both on our knees in the carpet in the locker room trying to bridge that gap and this was going from Philadelphia, where the elbows were pulled back by his ears to sort of that little more natural mechanics that he had in Columbus. And I was trying to have that conversation, and a lot of it was sort of bridging the language gap with the instruction. So I know since then, like he doesn't like to talk a lot about his game, but it's remarkable to watch, and the way he controls his body and the work he's done on that. What's it like as a student yourself? What's it like being around that for a year?
It's the best. I mean, it was the best. And we see the game in a very similar way, and we approach the game in a very similar way. And I'm not trying to put myself in even close to the same category as him, but that's what it was fun. And we just fed off each other and fed off each other's energy. And I mean, he helped me so much. And obviously just watching on a day-to-day basis, you learn a lot. But I think Bob is obviously exceptionally talented. The thing that Bob is really good at is creating an environment of zero distraction. And he commits to that so hard that, I mean, Bob is obviously having a great run right now. Like going back to the playoffs last year, but last year there were times when it was difficult, in Florida there. And I'm sure as you remember, it's like team wasn't doing that well. This guy has a big contract. And I just couldn't believe how rock solid he was and steady he was. And that taught me a lot, where it's like every goalie is going to go through 6 month periods where they don't feel good or things don't feel right or it's not natural. It's just about continuing to grind and have the same mindset. And that's where Bob excels, is his brain and his ability to just be on task every day is his superpower.
Okay, so that's funny because I read some interviews with you where you were talking about blocking out the noise and the importance of habits day to day and almost regimented. Is that something you'd already figured out yourself, or there's there elements of Bob sort of learning from him in that too?
Bob was great for me because basically I had a pretty good game plan of how I wanted to approach things, how I wanted to operate on a daily basis. And once I saw Bob, everything was just cemented for me. Like, okay, I'm on the right track. Because I do think that we have a lot of the same, like I said, the way we approach the game in the same way. Like, if you can have a clear mind and a focused mind going into every game, that is 99% more important than anything else going on with your game. And I had always felt that way, but it's just like we talked about before, you run into goalie coaches who don't approach the game the same way like that. And so it's difficult to like stay on task mentally. And when you have Bob there, it's just, it was great. The other thing is when you have a guy who makes the amount of money that he's making, he can really create a lot of space and confidence for himself. You know what I'm saying? Like,
in what way?
Just it's like with any very highly paid player, but at some level, once you reach across a money threshold, all of a sudden the power dynamic changes from an organizational, a coach, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
And so he has the ability much more to stay in a bubble and like he's signed for 8 years, whatever, and he's earned that. He's grinded for that. He deserves that, every penny of it. But there is a level of comfortability that comes with that I think makes goalie slightly easier than, like, for example, it took me a long time to figure out how to go from the NHL to the AHL to the NHL. I'm still struggle with it at times, but it was just difficult for me because I was always like, all right, I need to have one of the best games, you try not to think like that, but
You're adding pressure inherently. Yeah.
right. It's just human nature. It's just human nature. And so, pedigree, how committed the franchise is to you, those play huge factors. And I've seen, and I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. Like there's 10, 15 guys that I've played with who I'm like, this person is so ridiculously talented. If they would have somebody in the organization who is like, no, this guy's awesome. We need to put our chips in way more on this guy. I think that they would have succeeded. And I think you give them a little time, they probably would have succeeded and maybe even been great NHL goalies. But those are the games that you're trying to block out while also simultaneously playing the game the right way.
Right. That's like it's inherently, if you're thinking about the pressure of the moment or adding pressure to it, because like you said, you don't have the luxury of knowing that, hey, if this doesn't go great, I'm back tomorrow and nothing will change. You're adding, like, I mean, we get right down to the biomechanics, right? Like pressure can add tension. If you can't try too hard in this position, right? You add tension, you're done.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you can't, and that's a great Dustin Carsway quote. But he said, "You can't force your way into saves. You have to let yourself make saves."
Which is, it sounds easy to say, but man, is it hard to do in this position? It's like golf, right? You can't try harder.
You can't try harder, and then you also need. And going back to the experience, until you've let in 3 goals in the first 10 minutes in front of 20,000 people in an away arena, you don't know what that's going to be like until you're in that situation. And you need to get over that hump. And this is a whole entirely other conversation, but you need to go through the terrible times in order to reach your full potential. And that's, I think, true with every single goalie. I don't know if anybody, maybe like Shesterkin's, but even he's had times where he's struggled, but you have to go through the bad stuff to get to the good stuff.
Well, it's so funny because we had Charlie Lindgren on, and
and we have the same career path. I don't know if you know, we grew up together.
You guys are very similar. Oh, I didn't know the grow up part. I mean, I know you're both from Minnesota, and I've seen sort of the career arc, but when I clip the pro reads, I'm just looking at the saves. And he was looking a couple times at the score bug up in the corner, and I hadn't even thought of it. And it actually planted in my mind, like, hey, don't clip saves don't clip saves when it's 3-0 after 10 minutes, right? But he had the exact same mindset. He's like, hey, look, it's 3-0. This hasn't been a great start, or it's 2-0 and this hasn't been a great start, but I know I need to dig in here to give my team a chance to come back. And like, it was part of his mindset and his mentality. You do have to, I guess, experience it to know it.
Right. And those inflection points of the game, so important. But again, like I said, you just got to hope that you can stick around long enough to make it through those. And then
you benefit from the lessons.
Yeah. And learn from lessons. And Charlie and I are both, prime examples of that. But yeah, we grew up together. We're the same birth year. So we played against each other our whole lives. And the career path is shockingly similar. So he's actually got he's a year ahead of me. Unfortunately, he was in the NHL last year. So I got to outlast him by 1 year, but.
Do you guys keep in touch? Like, do you guys talk about this?
Yeah. And I actually, it stinks for me because, as I'm sure you picked up, Charlie is like one of the best guys. He's like one of those guys who everybody you talk to is like, oh man, what an elite human being, and I'm not like that, but he's an unbelievable guy. He's extremely gracious, both him and his brother. And so it's cool to see guys like that succeed.
So you mentioned AHL to NHL. And I've talked, to some guys in the past too about the jump and how different, like, I get it. It's where we get experience as goalies. It's where you learn some things, but at times it's also a totally different league, like the style of play, the ability to read off of it. I've always wondered if goalies who read the game exceptionally well might at times be better off in the NHL than the AHL, because a lot of it down there seems to be a game of mistakes and young players making mistakes and broken plays. What for you has been the toughest part of that back and forth, at various points in your career?
No, I definitely understand what you're saying, where players just don't necessarily make mistakes that often. So it's different in that way, like you said. I don't feel that way. I think the AHL, it's like, this was a big revelation for me, but if I can at least seal the ice in the AHL, whether it's like a backdoor or one-timer or something, if I can at least seal the ice, I'm going to have a very, very good chance to stop the puck. The NHL is like, if you're not completely square at the point where they take the shot, you're pretty much hooped. Like the players will score on you every single time. And if you're not dialed in, you're going to get pulled like pretty consistently, where it's like the AHL, you can will yourself to games like we talked about. Like if I just go into this game, focus on technique, focus on being square, be explosive, work as hard as I can, there's a good chance I'm going to let in 2 goals. We might win the game, whatever. The NHL is different in that if you're not feeling it, you know what I'm saying? Like feeling it, there's a very small chance you're going to win that game. And so once you kind of like understand that, you just focus on more of like, yeah, I'm the man. I'm feeling it. It's that confidence factor where in the AHL, I find that you can, well, at least for me personally, you can muster that and it's like man-made to a degree. Whereas it has to be more organic in the NHL. It's too good. And guys are so smart too, where it's like, they just like I said, they understand what you're doing and they're thinking like a goalie. And that's next level.
Yeah, I was going to say too, this is something I've heard from NHL goalie coaches increasingly in the last 3 years, maybe 4, like Roberto and the generation before, the generation of greats. Like they learned how to manage the nights where they didn't have their A game. They sort of learned how to win with a B game. Goalie coaches now are like, you can't. Like if you have a B game in the NHL right now, that's when you give up 7. That's when they put a crooked number up. And so that's hard mentally. Is the game harder mentally? Like, is the game? I've had a lot of guys say the game's harder than it's ever been, but I wonder how much of it is just mental beyond the physical. Yeah.
No, and I think Talbot, right? He talked about that quite a bit this year. I think he had a good explanation of that, but that's just like you said. I mean, you have to bring your A game. This is how I think about it. I have to bring my A game if we want to win. B game, maybe give us a chance to win. And if it's anything below that, it's like you're getting pulled or you're going to lose the game. And it's difficult to deal with that pressure. But again, like that's where I would go back to Bob. And that's where that mental serenity is so important of, I understand my game. I know how I want to play. I know how I want to be. And I cannot let anything affect that. And it's like a little baby bird that you just have to cradle all the time, unaffected by bad games, unaffected by 5, 6. And there's also the games where it's like you give up 2. You have to be honest with yourself. Maybe you weren't great. And there's games where you give up 5. And it's like, I was on the right track tonight. And so I think being extremely honest with yourself is also really important. But for sure, I find it's more difficult than it's ever been before. But it's also motivating too. I mean, I feel motivated to elevate my game. And I think that players actually might be a little farther ahead right now. And I think goalies will figure out a way for sure.
Yeah, I got to be fair to the players. They've caught up quickly and they're now working. Used to be in the summers, they were bigger, stronger, faster, and go golf. And the goalies were working on their game. Now the players are doing the same, and goalie coaches have betrayed us in some instances. They're teaching them how to do it. So, last one for this. You talked about regiment and habits day to day. Is that what allows you to sort of hold it like a bird, like the habits that you have, and making sure they're consistent? Allow anything that changes on the outside to just become noise if you stick with your regiment? And is there any, like, without giving it away, is there any example you could share with kids of something that you've added to your game that allows you to sort of create that bubble for yourself where as long as I do this, I know I'm fine?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is extreme. I think the older you get and the further along, you just have to commit more and more to this theory. But basically for me, I think about it as I'm living as a goalie all the time. Instead of trying to be like, oh, I'm going to get a great workout in a day and then go, post up and do nothing. I try to live as a goalie all the time and then have slight breaks just to appease my mind and like relax. But I feel like, and this is what the best goalies do, but they live in goalie mode all the time. Like even now I'm thinking about it. Trying to stay on top of it mentally. I'm trying to have the right temperament. Like once every 3 days, kind of go through that mental process of how I want to approach a game, the confidence, the feel, the visualization. And you can get better at those things. You can work on those things. Things as simple as like being able to focus for an extended period of time rather than, if you can lock in and engage on one thing for 30 minutes, which is actually very difficult in 2024, that will give you a huge boost. Just like simple things like that. But I think committing to living 100% of your time as a goalie, rather than thinking about it as like, all right, Monday through Friday from 9 till 2 p.m., I'm going to have it turned on. It's just like, okay, no, I'm turned on all the time, and then I'll just take breaks to turn it off. But that definitely helped me a lot. And it's hard to do. And obviously, I do this as a living and a profession. So it's not like you want a college kid to go crazy like that, But I think that that's important. And just the mental side, like we've been talking about, especially for young goalies, being a warrior in the net and being ultra competitive. Those are just things that maybe you can't teach, but you can develop them slightly, and that's the attitude that you have to have. You can't go into a game without competitivity and strong will. I don't know. Maybe you can teach that. Maybe you can't. I'm sure some people would say that it's lost getting, people are losing that more and more. I don't necessarily think that. I think it's just person to person. But for sure, to me, those are the bread and butter things of playing goalie that I never try to lose.
So I got to ask, Story, and I said last one, but I got to pull on that thread a little bit. And I don't know if I'm guessing you've worked with different like mental skills coaches, mindset coaches, sports psychologists over the years. But when you talk about, when you're in goalie mode but you're not playing that day, or maybe even in the off season, the ability to focus and concentrate, like we've seen, guys with concentration grids, maybe it could just be reading. Like, are there different things where you set like, hey, I'm not being a goalie, but I'm in a goalie mindset right now because I'm focusing on these things. Like, could it be as simple as reading books, or are there different tasks you like to go through to get to that cognitive state and practice that cognitive state?
Practice. I think it can be anything. Reading obviously is a great way to engage your brain, your eyes all at one time. So for sure, that's the staple. But I just think about like, it's getting harder and harder to focus on, like, it's hard for me to watch a TV show for 40 minutes and not look at my phone the whole time. I think like it is for everybody, right?
Yep.
Just like there's more distractions all the time. And I try to think about, I've looked in a bit more about like F1 drivers, but their staple is the ability to focus on one thing for whatever, 2.5 hours at a time. And I find that incredible. But I think about that with goalie too, where it's the same principle of living your life as a goalie all the time. What if I just go into the mental state I want to be in and then exist in that state for 2.5 hours from 7 p.m. to 9:30? That's a much more attainable thing for me. And so then I look at it as, okay, if I can just keep my concentration for 2.5 hours, like obviously in between whistles, you need to have a reprieve. Right. In between periods, you need to like give yourself a mental break. But that's the ultimate goal. And I think that that's a much more attainable goal than being like, go out there, hey son, go out there, try your hardest and stop all the pucks. It's like, well, then you have to make 35 or whatever great decisions, or more, 200 great decisions. But it's like, okay, if I can just be calm, focused for 2.5 hours, everything else takes care of itself. And so
the decisions get easier. Yeah.
It's just a way to simplify it. Right. And that's what we're always trying to do, is make it as easy on ourselves as possible. This is actually, I hate to keep throwing out quotes like this, but this is a great Bob quote. And it stuck with me still, but he said, if your mind is in two places, it's nowhere. So your mind just needs to be in one place. But if it's going in multiple places, then you're not getting anywhere. And I think that's really true, where it's like, okay, if I can think about something for like 5 minutes straight, that's pretty good. Like just keep my mind on task for 5 minutes at a time. And it just builds and it grows and it grows and it grows. Being present, being in the moment, all those cliches and things. But it is a hard thing to do. And it's a skill that you have to practice.
That was going to say, we had Caden Primo on earlier this year, and he had a bit of breakthrough year. And, it wasn't change in technique. It was a mental skills coach that he's working with. And the one thing he took away, or I took away from the interview, wasn't the specific things he was doing necessarily. It was the fact he was doing them daily. And so much like we work on our skating or our post play or, our puck, whatever it is, our body, we make sure our hips are healthy. making that a daily part of your routine will just make sure your mind's in a better spot once the puck drops.
Right. And this is kind of an unfortunate thing, but I think that there is a certain temperament and calmness, obviously, to a goalie, and you see it and I see it. You see it in guys play when they're erratic and they're not centered and focused. But there is a certain, it's like being an NFL quarterback. Again, it's just like that, where you have to have a certain temperament. And I've worked really hard to kind of train myself to be more of that temperament. It's not really that natural for me, but I think if you're a young guy trying to find ways to get better, I think that's an easy way to get better. Like being very calm, unemotional. Oh, you let in a bad goal. If you can like look at that from a third party perspective, rather than being like, coach is pissed, I'm pissed. It's like, who cares? Who cares? It's not going to do anything. And so those are things that everybody's always trying to work on. I'm sure you try to work on it with your job, but yeah, the goalie is like a real life representation of those, your mind kind of.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love it. And I got a young athlete in the house now too, not a goalie, but trying to, without being the dad that shoves it down her throat, just trying to introduce her to these things because I know they'll help her in those moments sort of stay focused. And then
you realize like you try to do it and it's like, this sucks. It sucks like trying to like calm your mind for 5 minutes, right? But
well, you said about watching TV, man. My wife's like, why are you looking at your phone? We're watching a show. And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, this is stupid.
Yeah, or like I do that. I know like, and you can feel it too, like when you go in a bad stretch of the season where it's like you're anxious, not eating well, you can feel it. And then you are like, okay, I'm going to commit to calmness and happiness. And yeah, these things suck. It sucks to go through that, but it just always yields the best results, unfortunately.
Oh, I love it. Alex, I feel like we could go forever. I've already taken up more of your time than I was supposed to. Thank you. Just the passion you have for goaltending, for being a guest on the InGoal Radio podcast. I know that our listeners are absolutely going to take a ton away from this. It was a real pleasure for me, and I know it will be for them when they get to listen to this. So thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Detroit Red Wings, a team that's massaged their goaltending over the last number of years, hoping that Billy and Alex are able to step in and carry the load themselves next year without all the different detours that they had to take over the last year. Should mention, we talked about NHL Sense Arena and the work that goaltenders can do with their eyes and in the virtual reality world. But there's another opportunity for netminders that is right before them this summer.
And we also mentioned in the parent segment the importance of mindset and how the things that you're doing are going to affect how you play. And so we would like to suggest that everybody out there learn more about working with Pete Fry this summer. His first in-person seminar is coming up this week. I believe it's in Ottawa. We've got full details over at ingoalmag.com. You can also check out goaliemindset.com to learn more from Pete and all of his socials. Fantastic full day in-person seminars that conclude with an hour on the ice where you can put all those new tools that you've learned from Pete into action. And if you are thinking of joining us in Vancouver on July the 20th, we would love to see you. Great chance to chat goaltending with the InGoal team there. But you can also join us virtually on July the 20th. Also over at ingoalmag.com, you'll get all the information. If you're an InGoal member, you'll get $25 off that virtual seminar. Nice savings to have. Good reason to be an InGoal member. And if you're not an InGoal member yet, and you go to one of the in-person seminars with Pete, you will get a free year of InGoal magazine as a result, because Pete really believes in InGoal as a tool. If you're already an InGoal member and you head to his virtual seminar, you're going to get your next year for free as well. So great value in joining Pete for his seminars. Great opportunity to work on what really is the most important part of your game. The thing that separates the good from the great is mindset. So check out Pete Fry's seminars this summer, this week, everybody.
Chance to train that mind. And I love the idea that we can log in and eavesdrop on it.
If you're not joining us in Vancouver, I look forward to seeing you online, Darren.
That's what I'm going to do.
And really quickly, if you want to get a taste of what it's all about, we've got 2 articles from Pete that are up on the website.
Good point.
Which includes snippets from past seminars, the one he did last summer in particular, including some ice time sessions. So your seminars, when you're here live with him, whether it's here in Vancouver or at any of the other locations, as Hutch said, starting in Ottawa, you will go on the ice and get to practice some of the things that, the pre-face-off routine, the various elements, your hype level. We got an article on hype level at ingoalmag.com. Confidence anchors. What are those? You get to learn about them. You get to practice them in the room, and then you get to take them on the ice and put them all together so that you can reinforce how those work from a mental standpoint and take them into next season to help you be mentally stronger between the pipes.
Next week on InGoal Radio, the podcast, we will have all of the fallout from the first week of free agency and where the dominoes fall there and how it impacts people within the respective systems and organizations of free agency. Look forward to that. Woody, get some rest.
I will.
Recoup. Hutch, continue carrying the load that we all know that you do. All that weight on your shoulders, and you continue just to do it without any type of complaining.
I'm just tipping the shots in.
Oh,
Woody's firing the big shot from the point, and I just tipping it in. He's doing all the work.
No, somebody around here's got to work, and it's Hutch.
Certainly not going to be me. Thanks to everybody for listening to InGoal Radio, the podcast, brought to you by The Hockey Shop, source for sports, Langley, thehockeyshop.com. Stay cool, have fun, and enjoy the start of silly season.